A very good day to you, wherever you happen to be watching this video, which is Nottage General Baptist and Unitarian Chapel's service of worship for Sunday the 17th of May 2020, a period when we are still in lockdown in Wales because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Thank you so much for joining us. And we begin our service by joining together in a period of prayer. Let us now offer our thanksgiving for the shelter from wind and weather, which hallowed by love becomes our home. For all those of our family and friends by whom our lives are sustained, and whose love brings strength to our homes and sweetness to our lives. For good companions who rejoice with us in our joys, who cheer us in trouble and keep us true to our ideals. For camaraderie in work and play, for all joys and sorrows that bring insight and understanding. May we help make the world a friendlier place for all who dwell in it. Amen. Now, the reading I have chosen for today's service will be very familiar to many of you. It's from Luke's Gospel, the 15th chapter, verses 11 to 32, commonly known as the parable of the Prodigal Son. Although perhaps the translation I have used will be less familiar to you. It's a more modern translation called The Message. Then Jesus said, "There was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, 'Father, I want right now what is coming to me.' So the father divided his property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country. There, undisciplined and debauched, he wasted everything he had. After he had gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all through that country, and he began to hurt. He signed on with a citizen there who assigned him to the fields to slop the pigs. He was so hungry he would have eaten the corn cobs in the pig's slop, but no one gave him any. That brought him to his senses. He said, 'All these farmhands working for my father sit down to 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I am going back to my father. I shall say to him, Father, I have sinned against God. I have sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me up as a hired hand.' He got right up and went back to his father. When he was still a long way off, his father saw him. His heart pounding, he ran out, embraced him and kissed him. The son started his speech. 'Father, I have sinned against God, and I have sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again.' But the father wasn't listening. He was calling to the servants, 'Quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Then get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. We're going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here, given up for dead and now alive, given up for lost and now found.' And they began to have a wonderful time. All this time, the older son was out in the field. When the day's work was done, he came in. As he approached the house, he heard the music and dancing. Calling over one of the houseboys, he asked what was going on. He told him, "Your brother came home. Your father has ordered a feast, barbecued beef, because he has him home, safe and sound." The older brother stalked off in an angry sulk and refused to join in. His father came out and tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't listen. The son said, "Look how many years I've stayed here serving you, never giving you one moment of grief. But have you ever thrown a party for me and my friends? Then this son of yours who has thrown away your money on whores shows up, and you go all out on a feast." His father said, "Son, you don't understand. You are with me all the time, and everything that is mine is yours. But this is a wonderful time, and we had to celebrate. This brother of yours was dead, and now he's alive. He was lost and has been found." That ends our reading from Luke's Gospel. Will you once again join me in a period of prayer and reflection? Spirit of love and life, we have been impatient and unkind with others and with ourselves. We have been jealous, boastful, and have let pride into our hearts. But you are not easily angered. You do not keep a record of our wrongs. Bring us back to your truth, that we may rejoice. Protect us and support us as we hope, trust, and persevere. For with you all things are possible. Spirit divine, we give thanks for this time of prayer and worship, this precious opportunity of realizing your presence, of laying before you our desires, our hopes, and our gratitude. We give thanks for this worship that binds us in spirit with others throughout our country, throughout our world, which unites us through them with all worshippers, and increases within us our sense of the splendour of our religious heritage. We give thanks for the light and truth that shine forth from the words of the great souls under the exalting touch of your Spirit, for the teaching and call which come to us from the living lips of all your messengers. May our worship here this day preserve your gracious power within us, to keep our actions pure and our souls untroubled amid the dust and heat of the world. In acceptance and in being accepted, in forgiving and in being forgiven, in overcoming inward divisions of self against self, may we have peace within. in according the respect that elicits respect, in being trustful and worthy of trust, in fostering mutually confirming and enriching relationships. May we build creative peace among all. May this always be our prayer, to be oppressed rather than to oppress, to suffer injuries rather than inflict them. As we look back over the road we have come, we see that the present often persecutes those who are sent to it from the future. Give us not to seek persecution, nor court opposition, but humbly to measure our own thoughts and deeds, whether they are indeed of the future. And may we know that the Spirit of all only listens to us when we speak as a brother or sister of all. I now invite you to join with me in saying the words of the Lord's Prayer, should you wish. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Now, one of the things that I often dislike being asked is, so what is it you do for a living? Not that I'm ashamed of being a minister, but because often when I say, well, I'm a minister of a chapel, it seems that people who I was having quite a nice conversation with about anything, football, everyday matters, suddenly change their view about me and seem to automatically believe that rather than being quite a nice chap, I must be involved in some sort of cult that deals in moral reward and punishment, rather than, as I see it myself, dealing with God's love for all. I can, of course, quite understand this reaction, as there are some religious groups that have made themselves out to be some sort of sin management program for people who want to ensure they are good enough to avoid eternal punishment and instead receive everlasting rewards. However, this is not the faith that I understand or follow. Instead, my faith is one concerned with forgiveness and reconciliation and mercy and love, and a God who would go to incredible lengths to remind us that all this is already ours. And yet, all the time one hears heartbreaking stories about people who have been terrified into believing that God is constantly angry with them. So I began to wonder if this was the kind of thinking that made Jesus tell the parable of the prodigal son, which we have just heard all those years ago. Since basically, here's what the first 3 verses of the gospel story today said. Now all the bad people who should be punished were coming near to listen to Jesus. And all the good people who should be rewarded were grumbling and saying, this fella Jesus welcomes these bad people And rather than punishing them for being bad, he takes them out for dinner instead. So Jesus told them a story about two sons. The first son took his inheritance and left town, so sure that if he got everything he wanted, he would be happy. And he wasted everything he'd been given, and instead was miserable. And so, returning home with his head hung low, he glances up and sees his father running toward him. However, before the son could get the carefully constructed speech out of his lips, the father throws his arms around him and covers him in love. What was lost is found, and what was dead is alive, says the father. None of which, or neither of which, are moral categories. These things call not for condemnation, but a party. The younger son may have squandered his freedom, but the older son was just as wasteful. The older son squandered his freedom by not thinking he had any. He squandered the gifts of the father by living a life of cheerless duty. And coming home from the fields, he hears the party underway and resents such a lavish show of love, thinking that love is a limited resource. He was being a complete brat, and yet again the father comes to him, reminding him of the great love he has for his child. The father sacrifices his dignity twice by running into the street to embrace his children, because that is simply a father's nature. And we are children of a God who does things like that. So in response to the people of his day who are trying desperately to uphold their reward and punishment model of religion, Jesus told them a parable about a seemingly bad son and a seemingly good son. A story about how nothing about their behaviour had any effect whatsoever on the heart of their father. Therefore, the tragic thing about this story isn't that one was selfish and the other was resentful. The tragic thing is that neither of them trusted the love of their father. And when that love is not trusted as being sufficient, we replace it with a punishment and reward system instead. If my work as a minister, however long it may go on, accomplishes nothing else, I hope it does this one thing: that everyone I come into contact with may know this one thing. If you have been told ever in your life that God is some kind of angry monster who is always disappointed with you for being a human being, then you have been lied to. Anyone within the church who told you that has failed you, and for that I am sorry. So if you take nothing else from this address, please hear this one thing: that angry, vengeful God is not the God I know. It's not the God I experience, and is certainly not the God I worship. And it's not the God revealed to us by Jesus of Nazareth, who ate with those who were considered beyond the pale and annoyed the religious authorities of his day, and who loved and healed and forgave people indiscriminately. This Jesus was God's way of telling us who God is. So when we wander, and we will, because we don't think we have all that we need, know this: we already have everything we need. All this grace and forgiveness and mercy and reconciliation of God is already ours. It will not be taken away as a punishment, and it will not be granted as a reward. It is our inheritance as children of God. So come to this feast knowing that everything God has is ours, and it is enough. Thank you for listening, and Amen. Well, we're now into the 9th week, I believe, of the lockdown, and the First Minister of Wales has informed the country that nothing will change in the immediate future. So when we will be back together, worshipping face to face, I don't know. But rest assured, during this time I will continue with these video sermons for what they are. They're a poor substitute, but at least they provide some sort of fellowship. And as always, if you do need any pastoral care, please don't hesitate to contact me via the Facebook page or on my works email address, which is nottage.minister@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today in this service, and we hope that you enjoyed it and hope that you will join us again in the future. But for today, we bring this service to a close with these words of benediction. It cannot be believed that people love humanity that do not like the neighbours with whom they live. Therefore, let us go and practice the first lesson of fellowship, to first love ourselves and to love our neighbours likewise. Then, and only then, can we listen to those who preach about loving all humankind. Amen.